Do you see this opportunity, the enterprise browser becoming ubiquitous?
If we look at certain segments now, financial, retail, manufacturing, healthcare, the juggernauts of those industries have all engaged, and they've engaged almost at the same pace. We have one quarter where 4 of the top 5 banks are actually purchasing in the same exact quarter. And so you start to feel like there's this tipping point occurring. And it's a wonderful thing because what happens is they land for a given use case, but they have a strategic objective. And the more you roll out an enterprise browser, the more ROI you get, the more tools you displace, the more workload you remove, the more security you provide. It's very rare that a CISO and a CIO can collaborate together on the same project. It's rare that the act of delivering better cybersecurity can reduce cost and improve end user experience. Like, we've always had to sacrifice at least one of those, if not 2 at a time. And so when those collaborate on that, you find that it picks up momentum. We almost lose track of why we're there because the original use case is now supported by 5 other use cases. And then we get to the point where, wait a second, I've got more control and capability with those endpoints than I do the rest of my company. How do we press out to that? And when we do, look at all the other tech we can retire, look at the simplicity we can bring. So it really is at this amazing moment where most of these use cases are being delivered now, and now it's the big expansion time.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for joining my podcast, Vigilance. I'm super excited to have you here today. Everybody seems to know about Island, but I think there's an opportunity to share a bigger picture.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, and I have to just tell a quick story because it's just imprinted in my brain. When we first started working and partnering together 3 years ago, I had a call with one of my big healthcare CISOs, and it was the first meeting. And I asked him if he could do one thing to increase security, what would it be? And it's really just my opportunity to learn about how I can help. And he said, have no data land on the desktop. And I said, I can do that. I can do that with Island. And he's like, who's Island? Wait, because this is like 3 years ago before everybody knew you. And he said, I need to see that vendor today. And I said, okay, this is a good way for us to start. So I just wanted to say thanks for making me a hero. My only job is to solve problems for my CISOs, and you allow me to do that. So let's take a minute, have you introduce yourself, maybe tell a little bit about Island, and then we'll kind of get into the podcast.
Okay. Well, I'm Mike Fey, co-founder and CEO of Island. Island's been around for about 4.5 years now. We've got over 300 customers, a couple million browsers out there, 400 people in the company. Half those are in R&D, which is with my co-founder in Israel, Dan Amiga. Island saw the opportunity to take this standardization of the browser, which occurred around an open source project called Chromium. So Edge and Chrome and, Opera Brave, they're all on this platform now, where most of those are focused on content providers and advertisers and e-commerce. We said, what if we took that wonderful open source project and drew our attention to security, to the business and to the end user, and really focused on adding in capability that would help those organizations? That's what Island started to do, and we've been on a fun journey for that. Recently, we're valued at $3 billion, which was a huge honor. But more importantly, the hundreds of customers were from the Fortune 10 down to 3,000 person companies have adopted Island, and really we've been able to co-write that future together. And what else can we do? When you have control last mile, there's so many opportunities to add value. And it's that collaboration with our customers that's given just almost an endless set of use cases. So really excited to kind of talk about it, because even people that heard Island a year ago, I would say we're dramatically different yet again. And I think next year we'll see even more.
Right. Yeah. That's why this podcast is so important and educational, because it's changing so quickly. And I want to make sure we keep everybody up to date. I think it's an unlimited number of use cases, because some we just didn't even know yet today, because we discover new ones every day. But that last mile of control, I kind of refer to it as zero trust on the endpoint. And so staying at the 10,000 foot level for a second, what is I'm sure, given a $3 billion, valuation, you have done some estimations on how big this market could be.
Yeah. The total addressable market is, question number one by, investors. And in our case, it is a staggering number. It's over 200 billion in total addressable market, which, if you think about it from a cybersecurity perspective, probably makes it the largest TAM in all of cybersecurity. And that's somewhat misleading because it's such a large TAM because it isn't just cybersecurity. We're adding value to the CIO and that stack of tech they use to deliver their applications. Then we've got use cases directly for end user productivity. But at the end of the day, it's knowledge workers times average browser selling price gets you well above 200 billion. And that's why the fact we've engaged with, the Fortune 5 and, small emerging companies and added value across that reaffirms that TAM. So it is a very big market. It's growing rapidly. Its adoption is going well. It's going very quickly, but it is a significant opportunity.
Yes, that's just an amazing number, and to think about that. And I always like to say how much you've changed the cyber landscape, but it's not just cyber, like you said. The CIO has just as many use cases here. Do you see this opportunity as, the enterprise browser and the becoming ubiquitous?
Yeah, I honestly think, based on, if we look at certain segments now, financial, retail, manufacturing, healthcare, the juggernauts of those industries have all engaged. And they've engaged almost at the same pace. We have one quarter where 4 of the top 5 banks are actually purchasing in the same exact quarter. And so you start to feel like there's this tipping point occurring. And it's a wonderful thing because what happens is they land for a given use case. They land to solve a problem, to add value, immediate value to the organization, but they have a strategic objective. And the more you roll out an enterprise browser, the more ROI you get, the more tools you displace, the more workload you remove, the more security you provide. And when we think about it kind of catching, that momentum, it's very rare that a CISO and a CIO can collaborate together on the same project. It's rare that the act of delivering better cybersecurity can reduce cost and improve end user experience. Like, we've always had to sacrifice at least one of those, if not 2 at a time. And so when those collaborate on that, you find that it picks up momentum, and we almost lose track of why we're there, because the original use case is now supported by 5 other use cases. And then we get to the point where, wait a second, I've got more control and capability with those endpoints than I do the rest of my company. How do we press out to that? And when we do, look at all the other tech we can retire, look at the simplicity we can bring. So it really is at this amazing moment where most of these use cases are being delivered now, and now it's the big expansion time.
Exactly. And I love the what you said about the CISO and the CIO partnering on these projects, because the use cases that are so popular in my group, they touch both. They serve both. And the collapsing of the stack is staggering, right? Because in security, I love to, share this story about platform, right? Platform was an ugly word for a long time because it meant locked in and expensive and a bunch of modules that you couldn't operationalize. And it just felt wasteful. And now platform is back, and the word platform is back because of complexity. The stack is too big. And I think of Island as a platform. I'd love to talk about it as a platform because I define platform by the number of use cases you deliver. So you could be the biggest platform there is because you outnumber any use cases I see out there. Where do you see, though, your customers starting? Is there a common use case that they start with before they, take advantage of the whole platform?
Yeah, I agree with the platform denotion. To me, a platform's always been defined by, can I deliver additional value with an architectural advantage? In other words, can we add more value in a cheaper path than buying other tech and slapping on other things together? To me, it's a real platform if you can expand easily in that value chain. And we definitely do that. And we have all sorts of modules now that are built on top of the platform. And so even architecturally, it looks that way. But where people start, it is a little diverse. But the big ones, you'll see contractor access, right? How do we bring in an affiliate, a contractor, someone we need to trust but can't trust? How do we bring them into our environment in a safe and efficient way? And removing shipping laptops, VPN connections, taking 3 months to get them there, having to share our passwords or usernames, and how we manage that identity becomes incredibly easy with enterprise browsers. So that's a great starting point. And it's also a good cultural change management starting point because, you're not putting your key executives on it. You're not risking the business on it. It gives you a chance to feel comfortable. And once you do that, you realize, wow, there wasn't a lot to this. I could deploy this everywhere else with confidence. So it's a good start. BYOD is very similar. And what's beautiful about BYOD, in most cases where people are engaging with BYOD, it's their IT and security team saying, let's give you more. Let's make life easier. And that's a great relationship to have with the end user and a great starting point for it. There's also another path that we see in call centers, we see in M&A, we see in contractors, which is VDI reduction. And that's a very big play, and it's got a huge ROI. And when we talk about VDI reduction, what we're really saying is when VDI first showed up, things like Citrix, it showed up to take a fat app and bring it to the edge. And we needed that. And that's a great use case of some of that tech. But over time, we saw, hey, wait a second, they can also create a data barrier. And I can let that contractor have access to my stuff and not let any of the data on the endpoint over VDI. The problem is the end user experience is just barbaric. You can't find anybody that's happy with it. It's a cruel punishment to be put on it. But then after that, the expense, it's ridiculous. And lately with it, without improving the tech, they're raising the price 100x, 200x. It's a perfect opportunity to say, are we using VDI correctly? And where we're using it as a container, as a delivery mechanism, that can stop. And in most organizations, that's 80+% of their VDI usage. So now they can think, what do we want to put on AVD? What do we want to have local? And Island can operate as a portal so the end user doesn't have to understand where is it coming from. Is this directly to the web? Is this streamed? But we give that, instead of delivering for the lowest common denominator application, we have one fat app so everybody gets a bad experience. Instead, we can give a great experience and stream only that which is required. And that provides a fundamentally different cost structure. It's better security and it's better end user experience. So that one hits early with organizations. And when it does, the ROI is so dramatic that it funds all sorts of other projects inside of the CIO and CISO team.
That is such a good point, because I've watched that in my group where the CISO will say, let's get the CIO on board around VDI reduction. So I can take that money, or we can take that money and fund all the other use cases, which is so fascinating, right? But, it also leads me to think about, zero trust. So I can remember, when people didn't know what zero trust meant. I'm not even sure everybody still does, frankly. There's zero trust for, identity. There's zero trust for network. But the zero trust on the endpoint is such a powerful statement. And I think, talking for just a second about the basics of how you break down zero trust on the endpoint. I mean, copy and paste is an example that comes quickly to mind. But I think, sort of those basics are not top of mind for people when they are thinking about Island. They're thinking, what does that mean? So maybe you can tell us a few kind of the basics that you cover here, like even passwords.
Sure. So let's think of zero trust from a conceptual perspective rather than what the network companies have tried to sell us.
Yeah,
so
right.
The network company's idea is, hey, if we have a trusted network connection, we don't have to trust anything. Well, if the data ends up on the endpoint, you implicitly have a lot of trust of that endpoint, right? You just said trust the network path. Okay, that's one element, but it isn't the element. So what we started off saying is, whether it's a cloud property, an internal property, whatever it is, we need to validate the machine. Is the machine jailbroken? Does the machine have malware, debuggers, things that would make us nervous to have an employee, a contractor interacting with us while those are there. So we do an MDM level check of the environment. Then we give them direct access to the property. So we control the network flow. So does that go back through the organization? Does it go behind the organization's firewall? Does it go directly to the property like a Salesforce? And then we deliver the policy for that interaction. And that policy could be by application. It could be generalized. And what would that policy do? That policy says, what should we allow to happen? So should we let people, let's use Salesforce. Should we let them be able to navigate all of Salesforce? Sure. Should we let them be able to see customer data? Depends. Which data? Should we mask data? Is there stuff we shouldn't let them see? Should we let them download that data? So can they copy and paste and if you will, steal our entire customer registry? Or maybe it's a customer support app. And should they be able to see the buying history of that customer or what they're doing inside of the applications? And so we can control everything from visibility to data flow. But then we can even do things like automate and do all the productivity stuff. But we can let that zero trust concept extend. Then we can call the zero trust networking companies if you still need that. If you still want to use a ZTNA connector. Now we have our own, but we can call whatever's sitting there. And so we can make that implementation of the zero trust networking very, very simple. Now, what I will tell you over time, though, you start to realize a lot of this SASE expense isn't needed in our zero trust design. We don't have to backhaul this traffic. It's absurd to think about points of presence when you're taking traffic to Salesforce, Workday. These are highly scalable web properties. They don't need you in the middle of that from a scalability perspective. But if we put the web filtering in the endpoint, we put the data management, the malware scanning, then we can give an end user a native experience, but infinitely better security in that process. So to me, it's really zero trust done in the manner we probably would have thought about it had this tech been around when we first came up with that, which is we don't trust the device, we validate the end user, then we decide what to trust on our data. Where should our data go? Where should it go? And then we decide the network path we're going to trust on and what information we want to accompany with that so that the rest of our security tools can do their job very, very well. I think had we rethought zero trust today, we'd start with that and then work our way out, not go from the cloud back, which is a very data center centric concept, which of course makes sense for the guys who are building data center gear.
Yeah, no, well said. That's so well said. I like that. And so the next challenge I often run into, and I'm sure you do too, is companies say, and most of my companies, being all Fortune 500, are not 100% browser based. It's a hybrid, right? And so, but you've like I said, you're innovating all the time and things have changed. And I've seen you front end fat client and do all kinds of streaming in the cloud. So talk to me about that objection, if you want to call it that, of I'm going to wait until I'm 100% browser based. Why? It's almost like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not going to take any of the benefits until I can take it 100%. But that, so any thoughts on that?
Well, certainly cybersecurity has been taught that whatever I buy should work everywhere. So when they look at this, they think of it that way. But in reality, when it comes to applications, we protect client server applications different than web applications, different than cloud-based apps. So we shouldn't have that requirement. But what we have built for ourselves is a bunch of modalities. We can show up as an extension. We can show up as our own browser. We can show up as a window. We can show up as a portal. And in many cases, the core use cases aren't about taking all of the traffic through an island approach. It may be, I have to extend Salesforce to affiliates. How do I do that? I have to enable these 10 properties to BYOD. I have to enable this to the M&A group. I have to do, this set of controls. So in that scenario, it doesn't matter if you do everything because you're doing what's needed for the use case. Then as you become more committed to an enterprise browser, then the fact that we can serve as a portal and we could call fat apps, we could call web apps, we could call internal apps, and even in many cases still control them. So take Excel. You could pull up in your Gmail a massive Excel document, download it onto the desktop, open it up in Excel, and the policy that was running in the browser will be pushed to the Excel environment. So we still have control over that. We've built DLP controls outside the browser now. So we're controlling the full device's DLP approach. We'll have all ports and protocols, malware scanning and web filtering and content filtering across everything, removing the need for a VPN, allowing us to shuttle that, fat app traffic when we need to. So at the end of the day, it actually doesn't make sense to require everything to go through it, or else why would we have a web filtering product? Because not everything's web filtering, right? Why do we do, email? Because not everything's email. But we are getting to the point where entire sets of employees, massive sets of employees, can operate essentially holistically in this environment. And every day you get further and further on. And so it's kind of why we get pulled into modernization projects. You have to start that modernization. And given you're going to get ROI back, and the ROI will be substantial, waiting is just a convenient thing to do. It's not actually a logical thing. When's the right time to save a bunch of money and get better security and have better end user experience, right? I'll wait till I could do it for everybody. Okay, why do you hate half your employees right now? Like, why can't they go there? And I realized people weren't sitting around with a bunch of excess personnel waiting to work on stuff, but this is an easy lift. It's an easy implementation, and you can crawl, walk, run your way through it. And the crawl gives you an ROI, and the run gives you an ROI, and the walk gives you an ROI. So you have that ability. And we've seen CISOs start with, well, it doesn't work for everything. Then all of a sudden they realize, oh, wait, I've got workers in China I've got to deal with. Go bring Island back in here. Oh, wait, I've got BYOD. How do I handle that? So often we just have to give it time to germinate for people to realize that, it's not an all or none game, and it will probably never be an all or none game.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think it is important. The enterprise browser is here, clearly, given this conversation, the enterprise browser is here to stay. And so it's when are you going to get on that train and find that first use case? And also there is this thought that, all the other browsers have to come off the desktop. They don't. This can be incremental, but also I've watched my CISOs that adopt Island start to have the vision of it being the only browser. But it doesn't have to start that way, right? It can start with, just leave everything the same, but if they want to access, they have to use the Island browser. And the experience is the same as using a Chrome browser. So it's so positive. So very, very, very interesting. It's hard to do a podcast without talking about AI. It's hard to do anything right now. It drives me crazy. I spend my whole day talking to CISOs about AI. And it's challenging because the pressure to use GenAI, and I'm not speaking, building models, that's one thing, but the GenAI apps out there, and there's now hundreds of them, the pressure comes literally from the top down, from the CEO down, saying, I want to, competitive advantage. I want automation. I want to see us using this. And security wants to be that enabler, but data loss is real. I mean, once it goes into the model, it ain't coming out. So, maybe you could talk for just a minute about the beauty of how Island addresses Gen AI.
Yeah, Gen AI is a lot different than, say, when we first saw the cloud. Because the cloud was about a cost structure change, right? It was about, at the time when we first ran into cloud, it wasn't about doing things better. It was just cost. Now it's about better. Gen AI is a competitive differentiation. So security can't get in the way. It'd be like, say, I don't want to let my team compete with my competitor, the next biggest brand next to me. That's not going to happen. So we have to enable it. So a couple things at the last mile that are really important in that topic. One, this is going to be a shadow IT problem like no other. It is not going to be, I have a lot of people focused on, here's the model we're going to use. How do you protect it? Okay, let's discuss that. And we can protect what goes into it. We can protect what comes out of it. We can apply rules and policies to that to make sure that you don't share confidential information. But your real issue isn't the one you know about. It's the 7 million ones you don't. And they're going to keep proliferating. So we have to have full control, almost like back in the CASB days when we thought CASBs would be important. But the problem with the CASB was, how do we govern what we don't know? So we get a shadow IT report and then hopefully get control of it. Well, it's going to be a lot harder than that this time around. So having that complete visibility and control at the browser level will ensure what we run into in that shadow environment, we can apply the same rules to. We can redirect people to the LM models we like. That's the next item. And then we go a step further. Let's think about AI not enabling it, but using it. Anomalous detection, anomalous awareness of what's happening across multiple applications is best done at the operating system. The operating system in this case is the browser. So having built-in anomalous detection to run across that, to bring forward and say, this looks odd, this is a problem, becomes very important. But the key is we have to be bigger than cybersecurity now. We have to think bigger, because anomalous could be a call center agent running slower than another. It could be somebody's machine about to die. It could be a problem in their network. It could be a cybersecurity issue. The same anomaly engine can see all of that and start to give us insight to that. So for all the challenges it's bringing, it's going to bring us back some benefit as well. And the Island browser brings that to bear. And then finally, we have this idea of appropriate availability. How, as we start to embrace these AI engines, do we make them available to our end user? How does our end user know which ones we're okay with, which ones we're not okay with? How does that education occur? That's where the ability to own what the end user sees, what they can click on, where they can go is very easy, because the companies now will go build portals and they'll try to direct everybody. They'll have big R&D efforts to that. Instead of a couple clicks and it's there. And now it's a kick out in the browser and it's ever present for them. And so really easy to embrace AI in a acceptable manner when you have control of the last mile. If you don't, you're going to put that energy into the couple AI models you want everybody to use, and then sit there and try to wonder, how do you stop the rest? Because between Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Salesforce and Workday, whose model are you going to block? Because all you have is an IP bank. You're not going to block access to Amazon. You're not going to block access to Microsoft. You're not going to block access to Salesforce. So those models will be in your world. You have to have last mile control to manage it.
Exactly. So well said. It's interesting, I'll share for a second my challenge right now, right? Because I curate technology for CISOs. And so I'm in the midst of, I don't know, I'm on vendor number 20, I think, of, looking at GenAI vendors. I mean, it's just absurd. And, and actually there's a lot of slideware and not a lot of product. And every single one I meet with, I'm like, well, that Island does more than that. Like, I sound a little like a commercial, and I'm sorry, but the reality is that there's all these vendors out there with, browser extensions or proxies and, all these complex things, when it really just comes down to what you're doing so comprehensively. And so just wanted to pay you that compliment, because it's really an interesting process to go through and meet with all these. There's so much noise, and you're the bar. And every single one I meet with, I'm like, oh, they don't meet that bar. So it's super important, and it's going to happen. And I like that shadow IT. That's a perfect comment. So yeah, I know we're running out of time. So I just want to say first, thank you. Super good. We just have to continue with this education. I've been in cyber 24 years, and I've not seen a single vendor change the landscape of cybersecurity. And I know there's the IT side as well, but for my world, the cybersecurity, this dramatically, cost reduction, risk reduction, complexity reduction, because complexity reduces risk. We have so much complexity, and this is so simple. So thank you, because it's exciting. It makes my job more fun, frankly. But I will pass it back to you to see if you have any final comments.
First and foremost, thanks for everything. We have had a lot of fun working with some of your CISOs and helping have a big impact, and they've had a big impact on us bringing this to market. So that's been wonderful. While I can't guarantee Island will always be the number one in the space, I want to make it so. This space is very real, and its time has definitely come. We are the biggest player. We're the most complete, offering right now. So definitely, we'd love people to take a look at that. But I don't think it's a question if you're going to have an enterprise browser in the next couple of years. You will. You or your successor will implement one. Like, somebody's going to. It's going to happen. It makes too much sense, and it's hilarious. I can't tell you how many meetings people come to it going, I thought I knew what you were. You're a secure browser. I looked at this 10 years ago. We don't need another browser. I have a browser for free. And then 30 minutes later, all right, here are the 4 projects we want to try. Let's get inside that. So, what I would urge your watchers to do is take that 30 minutes. Worst case, you're going to know why it's not for you. But more than likely, you're going to see some opportunities to give value back to your company, give a better end user experience, save some money, but improve your security. And you'll get to decide in your journey when that's appropriate for you to do that. Every company's got their own path. But I would say the debate of whether this is a thing or not, I think that's been, with 20% of the Fortune 1000 already on it, it's gone. The ship is sailed. Now it's what's the right way to do that for each organization. And obviously your viewers know their organizations better and they'll choose wisely. But they should probably have an education. And I think that's what we'd be happy to do for anybody that wants one.
Well said. Education is everything. That's my job. My job is to educate on what's possible and be that educator and bring new things to market. And so I agree. That's 30. All it takes is 30 minutes too, because it's actually not a hard concept to understand. What's probably challenging is all the use cases and where to start. Where do we start? But that, we can decide that when the time comes. So good final thought. And thank you, Mike, for joining Vigilance. I appreciate it.
Thank you.